Now, for more on the latest trends in the food and beverage industry, let's bring in Jeffrey Dorfman. He's the author of Economics and Management of the Food Industry. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Rachelle. Glad to be with you.
Now, Jeffrey, how would you describe the current state of the food and beverage industry, given how much they contribute?
Well, I think it's actually quite healthy. We've had some mergers. We see some new entry. We see a lot of new products, consolidation, strong brands, functional foods, health trends. I think there's a lot going on, and I think people are pretty optimistic about the way forward.
So let's start by looking at some of the key mergers and acquisitions in the food and beverage industry, especially in the last few years or so. What are the real standouts?
Well, AB InBev's creating just an enormous beer company is obviously the standout. And then you have Kraft Heinz and not only their merger, but then their sort of quick abortive attempt to take over Unilever.
Now, usually we see a lot of these big tech mergers really get the headlines. So by some analyst estimates, 2016 was a rather lackluster year for big mergers and acquisitions for food and beverages. But how ripe is this sector when it comes to being the next round of mega mergers, say in the next year or so?
I think we're going to continue to see mergers. I don't know if we'll get a mega merger because those are always hard to predict. There's not too many targets and those are tricky deals to put together. But on the other hand, interest rates are going up. And people interested in doing mergers are going to want to get in while the money is still cheap.
And what are some of the issues that may really put a dampener on some of these deals? Perhaps some of the regulatory hurdles or even some of the social issues?
You know, I think the regulatory hurdles are actually working in mergers' favor because the regulatory issues are becoming so complex and expensive. It's just easier to be a big company than a small one these days. It's possible that antitrust regulators might turn down some, but there really aren't a whole lot of possible mergers that would raise too many concerns. So I actually think regulatory environment may see us headed towards more consolidation.
And as you mentioned, AB InBev, one of the biggest ones that we've seen. So we know that 20 and 30-somethings have really been more open to buying some of this small batch or craft beer, which really started to cut into market share for the really big beer companies. How are food and beverage companies responding to meet the needs of some of these millennial consumers and some of their changing tastes?
I mean, they're doing it by buying up those small startups. There's a thing going on now we call entry for merger, where small companies start and they try and build a product, and if they get a niche, they get immediately bought up. And I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see the innovators being small independents, and then as soon as they succeed, one of the big companies is going to snap them up.
Now, what do you see as the potential challenges for the growth of the industry going forward, especially as trends and tastes start to change?
It's always a challenge to stay on top of the trends, to move fast enough. You know, it's difficult to reformulate a lot of these products so you can maintain shelf life and stability while meeting the new nutritional standards that your customers expect. They want fresh, they want healthy, they don't want certain ingredients, and that's keeping the food scientists on their toes for sure.
Now, especially when it comes to the issue of health, we're seeing a lot of real innovation when it comes to the food and beverage sector, everything from artificial meats, basically any kind of way to really try and find a healthier option. What do you see going forward in that regard?
I think that's going to continue to grow. I think healthier is still going to be big. I think local food, being closer to the source, is going to be big, but definitely all those sort of health-related and sort of social justice type related issues are on consumers' minds, and the manufacturers are paying attention.
So if we break some of these things down, say you've got demand, agricultural issues depending on weather patterns, consumer taste, manufacturing trends, all of these really have the capacity to shake up this sector. So if you had to think of one that perhaps would have the biggest impact likely on the industry going forward, what would stand out for you?
I mean, the biggest impact on the industry going forward would be if we got into a worldwide trade war. That's going to disrupt the whole industry because agriculture, the percent of it that's traded worldwide is just enormous.
And speaking of that, agriculture actually employs more people in the industry than anyone else. Any concern there about what might happen then to the future of jobs, especially when it comes to food and beverages then?
I mean, we certainly are. As you said, you know, the food and fiber sector is the #1 employer in the United States. We export 25% of our production, so we definitely want to keep the trade flowing around the world.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeffrey Dorfman, author of Economics